Welcome to Deal Talk. I'm Jeffrey Veit. We talk about avoiding dealer tricks and buying smart and current events about the auto industry on this podcast. We want to make sure you get your best choice and your best deal when you purchase a car, truck, motorcycle, boat, motorhome. We do that pretty much every week or every 10 days or so when we do an episode. Today we're going to talk about timing, among other things, but that's at least one of the things we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. In the electric vehicle corner this week, I noticed that a lot of ads talk about driving range, but not one single ad told the rest of the story. Not one. They give you the range, but they don't tell you that the more accessories you use, like air conditioning and radio and lights, things that you use, the shorter the driving distance, because they use electricity too, and they take from the battery. There's not two sources, right? The faster you go in an EV, the less the range. That's another one. Because the faster you're going, when you get highway speeds, it requires more electricity than driving around town. And so they don't get as much distance. It's not like a fossil fuel, so your fossil fuel vehicle, as you get out on the highway, you start getting better gas mileage. Not the case with electric. It uses more power, so it doesn't have as far a driving range. You notice you've probably seen the ads for the new BMW i9, their brand new vehicle. About $100,000 for this vehicle, right? 100 and some thousand. I would say that it requires a pretty wealthy person to afford that vehicle. That would be a guess, but that's a lot to spend on a vehicle. And most of them are a little more than that if you wanted the real niceties, but they get 390 miles of range. That's what it says in the ad, but it doesn't. That's the point I'm trying to make. It doesn't really get that range because you use that stuff. That's the point of having a vehicle like that, so you can use all those accessories, have all those amenities around you, right? An article in my Go-To magazine, Consumer Reports, said the average new vehicle is $50,000. Well, here, after a little research, you figure out that if you take the electric vehicles out of it, the average new vehicle is way less. But electric vehicles are expensive, so they show off the average. They're trying to make it look like the average is close to the price of those. It's not. It's not close to the price of them at all. Electric vehicles are way overpriced. I just took a long trip to my daughter's house. My daughter bought a new house. She lives in Cape Cod. So I drove from where I live, Central Florida, to Cape Cod because I loaded all my tools in my trunk so I could do everything that a house needs to be done that she just bought. They always need something, right? And I needed a few things and a yard and a bunch of stuff. I was cutting trees. I had all kinds of things I had to do, but it takes about 19 hours one way. I stop for sleep about halfway, about 6 or 7 hours, and then drive the rest, right? My Toyota XLE, Camry XLE, averaged 32 miles a gallon. As a matter of fact, 32 miles per gallon on the way up and 33 miles a gallon on the way down, way home. I only saw, of all the stops I made, I only saw one set of chargers on the way up, EV chargers, and two sets on the way down. And each location would have taken an extra 15 or 20 hours for charging. And it probably cost about the same for fuel. I spent $160 both directions, $320 total on gas. Tolls would be the same for either one, right? But convenience was great because there are gas stations everywhere. Not so for EV. Who wants to worry about getting stuck on a trip? I don't know about you, but I want to go on a trip like that. I don't want to have to worry about that sort of stuff. With EV, it could definitely happen. And by the way, not any of the chargers that I saw, not any of them, were the superchargers. They were all just basic ones. They were just the plain units, which means it takes longer to charge. Talking 5 or 6 hours. Because it's not like you want to get a partial charge to get home. You're on a long trip, you want to charge it all the way. Or you have to stop sooner. This is all part of the plan for Hans. Hans and the WEF, the World Economy, the World, what is it, WEF? The World Economics Forum and the New World Order. They stated publicly they don't want to cut the automobile ownership by 75%. That means they want 3 out of 4 people in America not driving. My drive was tough enough, but in an electric vehicle, it would have been unbearable. I drove so I could take my tools and flying and rental car and all that stuff would have been $4,000 to cut to at least $3,000. So I cut that way down. Didn't have to do any of that. These are the facts. A person has to be either ignorant to the facts or just full of the bull on electric vehicles. Even if you're wealthy and don't care about the price difference. Let's say you don't care. You're going to spend $100,000 on an electric vehicle. So you can say you have one, right? You're helping Mother Nature. Guess what? It's not going to help global warming at all. Not a tiny little bit. Nope. Or climate change. Not going to make any difference there. If it did, you'd have to get the whole world to do it. Now, if the whole world did it, it'd make some difference. Maybe a half a degree. Half a degree is not going to make any difference. The planet goes up and down a half a degree or full degree all the time. We're just looking at a 200-year window because we haven't recorded the temperatures except for that period of time. These things happen on the planet Earth over thousands of years. We're not looking at the right picture. But in any event, you got to think about that. Even if, like I was going to say, even if you're wealthy, don't care about the price, it still doesn't make any sense because the other issues, the safety and convenience and resale, etc., they still make it ridiculous to consider owning one. We've been trying to build those things since the early 1800s. They don't work. The battery doesn't work. It's never going to work right. I don't care how much Elon works on it. It's still going to have its idiosyncrasies, big ones, making it way more difficult than fossil fuel. Get the hydrogen. That's the way of the future, the hydrogen vehicle. Most plentiful element in the universe. And once we get it so that we can fill a car up easier, that's going to change everything. It'll change the whole planet. Anyway, get back to what we were talking about. If you like the podcast, please take a couple of minutes and do a review on whatever podcast source you use, whichever one. Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever. If you've already done a review, I thank you very much. It's very helpful. I really appreciate it. Tell everybody you know about the Deal Talk podcast, and they'll save money, possibly big money, and you'll be a hero. That's the easiest way I know of to be a hero. Listeners who'd like some written material to carry when they're out shopping, get a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon, Kindle, or Barnes & Noble Nook. It's $3. Think about this. Everybody should have one. Everybody's buying one. They aren't. But they should, because you can use it again later. It doesn't have to be this time. And you can use it this time. And even if you read it at the end and you said, nope, I didn't miss anything, wasn't it worth $3 to know that? She just kills me that nobody, that not everybody has one. I would think there'd be, a lot more sold than have been sold. And like I said, it's not because of the money. At $3, I'm not making any money. I make about, I think it's like 90 cents. I make $1. So if 1,000 of you bought one, I'd make $1,000. Wow. Anyway, to get back to what we're talking about. I know we've talked about timing a couple of times before, but it's an important subject, even now. When's the right time to buy? I'm talking about what month? What day do you purchase? What season do you purchase in? What time of day? Does it make any difference? What's the best choice? Does the timing make any difference, big or small, or no difference? And if that matters when you buy, does location where you are have anything to do with the timing for you might be different than the timing for someone halfway across the country? Does the timing and the location work together? Does the seller's calendar make any difference? Does the dealership look at it any different? They'd rather you bought month, but rather than a different month, or they're struggling harder one month than another month? Can you predict that in advance? I don't know, But anytime you save, there's a way to save some money, you should take advantage of it. I don't care if it's $100 or $1,000, but even if you save $500 or $600 by buying in the right time, putting all the time factors together, that's $10, $12 a month, every month, in a crazy economy. That's some money. Let's break it down in segments. First, yearly timing. In the North, wintertime can motivate a dealer for a couple of reasons. I used to live in the North. I know what they are. And one is because people are staying home. It's stinking cold. In fact, from late January to through February, early March, it's just stinking rotten cold. Sometimes it doesn't even snow. It's just so brutally cold. You don't want to go near the outside. Another would be after a snowstorm or during a really cold period, colder than usual. store traffic is way down, so you go in to look at a car, they're going to, or a truck or a motorcycle, they're going to be looking at you a little differently. Holidays like Christmas slow down big purchases. Well, that's a factor. If they got to sell cars all the time, so or trucks or motorcycles, they have to sell all the time. It can't slow down. They have to find ways and people to deal with during those times. And if it requires a little more given up by them, they do it. That's why they only look at the average. Sometimes multiple factors hit at the same time, and that can multiply the dealer's desire. And that's good news for you, man, when that happens. I'll give you an example of that would be the month of February. The month of February is an example of that for sure. Holidays just ended, month before, right? In the north, it's really stinking cold. And it's a short month. The dealer has to spread his overhead over 28 days instead of 31. Now, that's not that big a deal, but it's 10%. They got 10% less time. The dealer is pressed to make deals more than usual. Salespeople and management are paid monthly. And 99% of the dealerships in the country, they are. That's a factor. You might think this means they need to make more per unit, but that's not how it works. Nope. Actually, most dealers in the north, or anywhere during those times, will bend over backwards and fold on any reasonable offer to make a deal. Especially in the Northeast in February, it's really, really tough. And towards the end of the month in February, it's better. Anytime after a big snowstorm is a good time. On a lesser scale, July and August can also be a good time to buy because people are vacationing. And there's not many people going into the dealership to buy, so they're going to try to make you into a buyer a little harder than they normally might try. That interprets into money. That's what I'm trying to say. In the South, it's hot on the asphalt. It's starting to get hot already. It's only June. The other day it was 96. I think it was Tuesday. No, Wednesday it was 96 degrees. So on a car lot, it's probably 110 on the asphalt. They don't want to be out there. There's nobody who wants to be out there looking around, so you might be the only customer on their lot. And talking about the end, August, that's also the end. It's when the model year ends. The announcement days are usually they're anywhere now, but generally most of them are in the September range. So it's a good time to get out and buy. The inventories have to be moved, the current year inventory. Now, there's not going to be a lot of leftovers this year because of inventory problems. And that's what we've been dealing with here in the U.S. is that, inventory is an issue, but it's not usually like that. In the South, right after thunderstorms or a severe rain period, any super hot afternoon on a super hot day can be an advantage. Sure, those are things you don't think about, but they do because that's going to be less people on the lot. It's not the dealers that gets hot. It's the other people that aren't looking because it's hot. They don't want to go through all that, right? After the holidays, like the New Year's week, people are recovering from the holiday expense and the stress, regardless of where you are. Yearly advantages are basic and easy to figure out if you stop and think about it. Hey, really, you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about this. You just have to spend some time thinking about this. That's all. That's what we're trying to say. What about monthly timing? Like we talked about, the last big day of the month is big, but most people aren't aware that dealers have budgets and sales departments have goals, and many salespeople have bonus levels. And February being the 28 days and cold weather can be a winner for that reason alone, but the last day of the month is a good choice any month. The first day of the month can also be as good as the last day of the month. People don't know about that one quite as much, but it can be. Because of the dealership, it can be the same. The first day of the month, that might be the last day of last month if it was a slow month the month before, so it might be the 32nd instead of the 1st, but of the prior month. But that can be, or they might want to just get off to a good start. But the last day of the month would be my first choice, but the first day of the month is also a good time. 28th of February has got to be the peak, especially in the Northeast. As far as weekly, I suggest Tuesday and Wednesday, not the weekend. I know you might think the weekend has sales and advertising and all these things going on, right? But that's not how it is, Dealers aren't as hungry on those days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. No, because that's when people generally look more. It used to be more so than now because people work any goofy day of the week now. You don't have everybody used to be off on Sundays, everybody, but I don't know. That's probably not the case anymore, but Still, the weekends are busier, and that's when they'll do their advertising. They're not trying to get you to jump up from the chair and run out and buy something. They're just trying to direct the traffic that's already out. You might hear about a sale on the radio or TV, and it might be, or it might be in the newspaper, but it's always bull. I'm telling you. The reason they use the weekend for sales is because the people are out looking already. That's why. And that's why I said it's really not that something that's a big deal. In the automobile business, advertising seldom draws people out. It really doesn't. Very seldom. It just directs the traffic that's already available and looking. So the dealers try to give you a reason to come to their store. That's why you get so much bull in the advertising. They just want to get you in there. They'll figure out how to straighten that out once you're there. I realize that you may need a vehicle on the spur of the moment. Sure, that happens. You may not have any advantages when you're buying. That's okay. Stick to the techniques you've talked about here on Deal Talk, and you'll be okay. But if there is an advantage, you want to know about it, right? That's the thing. You just want to stop and think, is there something going on today that can help me or tomorrow? Or would I be better off waiting a couple of days? Or what? Sometimes that's the case. What about time of day? Early morning, lunchtime, evening. Some people say late in the evening is the best time, but I don't agree. Late evening, things get hurried and all the decision makers for the dealer aren't there. People shop a lot in the evening. I suggest a late afternoon on a weekday. That would be my suggestion. All the factors needed are available, from the boss to the bank, the used vehicle wholesalers to buy your trade. All those things are able to be contacted in the afternoon. And it's, like we talked about, Tuesday and Wednesdays are kind of ho-hum anyway, right? Dealers are more flexible when the rates and things like that, when the bank can be contacted, so they don't have to worry about it. First of all, they get an exact answer for their qualification. Second of all, they know you can call right then and check on stuff, so they are more likely to give you a good rate because they know you can also call your banker while you're sitting there if the bank's open. And all of the dealership's decision makers are present, so it's a tough deal and you've really worked them hard. They can go to the dealer if they want to. We've talked about seasonal, monthly, and time of day considerations, but what about model year considerations? Do you go leftover or new model year? What's the best deal for you? This year, there aren't going to be many leftovers, and the supply and prices are crazy, so as far as timing, right now, especially right now, there isn't much in your favor. I say wait until the new regime takes over. Some sort of normalcy will happen, hopefully. But if you're leasing, leftovers are probably out of consideration. In fact, because of the over-sticker pricing right now, leasing companies aren't going to do anything as far as over-sticker on a leftover for sure. That's out of the plans. Once the official model announcement comes, residual values, the ending value at the end of the lease, that's a factor that has the biggest effect on the monthly payment. Take a dive on the leftovers. They go down. So if it was normally 52%, let's say for a 4-year lease, when the announcements come out and new models come out, that leftover will drop to maybe 47%, 5%. That makes a big difference in the monthly payment. And when you get it back, when you come back in from your lease, instead of being, if it's a 3-year lease, instead of looking like a 3-year-old vehicle, it's not. It's going to look like a 4 or 5-year-old vehicle or 4-year-old vehicle because you bought a leftover or leased a leftover to begin with, right? In most markets, before the official new model announcement day, leasing is okay on leftover. But once the announcement day is hit, when they have the ads that say coming January 6th of this model, once that hits, then the rates change on leftovers and there's no way to lease. It's going to be tough leasing even a current model year because they're selling vehicles for over-sticker, and the leasing companies generally won't do over-sticker, so they're going to want you to put money down, and that ruins the whole point of leasing. And there's another downside to leftover, the less chance of you making any money, right? This all may fall by the wayside if the FTC doesn't help all of America. They've had time, but the government fish smells from the head down, and the culture is deep. If you're buying and keeping a unit a long time, then leftover is probably better because of less net dollars and overtime. But in the case of the FTC, you're not going to be able to sell the vehicle at a profit. If you lease a Ford, you've got to return it to a Ford dealer. or buy it. You can deal with a Ford dealer, but you can't trade that Ford in on a Chevy, for instance. Nope. That's what they changed a couple of years ago, and I've been fighting with for it to do something about it, and the FTC is working on it. They're slower than a herd of turtles, but at least they say they're working on it. I don't know. You got me. I don't know whether they're doing anything or not. Give me an example. 2 vehicles, one current model year and one leftover. Model year, price $31,000, leftover $28,000. Some models just 1 year apart. If the difference is greater than $2,000 or 8%, then the 1-year-old should be a better investment on a buy because of the initial money outlay, and there's going to be less tax, less interest, and stuff on the leftover. So if you're getting a discount of where the leftover costs you $2,000 less than the current model, the new model that came out, well, that's probably a good deal. If it's less than that difference, then it's not. Let's say the new model is worth maybe $11,500 5 years from now. That's a 35%, and the leftover is worth 25% because it's a year old. $500 instead of $11,500. The leftover is $3,000 lower resale for a 5-year value, but you saved $3,000 in the initial price difference to begin with, so the leftover is a better value because of the lower sales tax and the interest and all that stuff. And at worst, it would come out even. So as long as you're getting at least a $2,000 discount, the leftover is the way to go, is okay to go with. Let's put it that way. I don't know if it's the way to go, but it's okay to go with it. But any less than that off, then my opinion would be not to do that. Every model line is different, but most will follow that same pattern of value, right? If you trade in 4 years, that might not be the case. They would be closer in value, and the new model year is probably better. But as you keep it longer, the leftover becomes a better value. So if you're keeping a car a long time and you can find a leftover for a couple $1,000 less, that's the way to go, for sure. As far as upside down, aka minus equity, current model year versus the leftover, about the same if you've saved 8 to 10% like I suggested on the leftover. You're going to be in the same situation. Another fact is that the leftover could be a budget factor as well. Lower monthly payment, less sales tax, less total interest. So the leftover is going to be if it's a budget issue, it's going to certainly look like a better deal. And one of the downsides of the leftover is that, of course, you don't have any selection. There aren't much selection when it comes to those. You either got 1 or 2 sitting around, and you kind of got to settle with whatever color they got available and stuff, But if you don't care about that stuff, it's not important, and okay. And the options are limited too, so you're not going to get as much selection. But that's if the leftover happens to fit, though, that's where you got to make a choice. Another alternative for both of these choices would be to go with an almost new, a used vehicle. We talked about it many times. Almost new vehicle versus a new vehicle. In the case of a high mileage driver, especially, it's definitely a better way to go. Even comparing it to lease, it would be. But in any case, because if you're a high mileage driver, you buy one that's 2 years old and it costs you $5,000 less than the new ones, let's say, and it's a couple of years old, it's got miles on it. 6 or 7 years from now, or 5 years from now, it's going to have 120,000 miles on it, and the new one would have 100,000 on it. So there's not going to be that much difference. And so you would have paid out a lot less money and a lot less interest and all those things. So the 1 or 2 year old trade for a high mileage driver is definitely can represent a great value. If you compare the net dollars, the late model used could be a big dollar advantage. So if you look at the total dollars, you're going to have less outlay, and part of that is, I bring it up is because it means your monthly payment's less, your sales tax is less. Sure, you didn't get to put the first 10 or 15,000 miles on it. Who cares? 4 or 5 years from now, it's going to make any difference who put the first 15 on it. No. Some other scenarios, like I mentioned earlier, you got a 2-year-old used, 1 year older than the leftover, and it's about $25,000. The 5 years from now, it's worth 20%, $5,000. $2,500 less than the leftover was in our original estimate, but it was $6,000 less to begin with. So it's really got a $3,500 advantage. And if you're driving a lot of miles, what you want to do is have the less outlay you can, because when you drive a lot of miles, you're going to take a little bit of a beating on the value anyway. Resale, that's what happens. Miles other than, damage from, on your background report, miles is the biggest factor. And if you're putting a lot of miles on, you're going to get beat up no matter what you buy. So it might as well be a lower investment if you can make it. It would be even bigger difference on the current model year. So if we were comparing the current model year, the new one that just came out with a 2-year-old, it would be thousands difference. It would be huge, and it would be a good thing if you drive a lot of miles. Like I said, if you drive 25, 30,000 miles a year, what difference does it make that it had 15,000 on it when you bought it? Because 5 years from now, it's going to have 120 or 30,000 on it. What difference does it make that it's got 130 or 115? In terms of value, not much difference. In terms of some maintenance difference, but not that dramatic. As far as the leftover, you're going to see that more when the model year changes. September, October-ish, you'll see more of those around. You'll have the leftover, maybe not this year because of the low markets, but you might have in some models a leftover. And then you've got the one that just came out, and then you've got a 2-year-old trade. There's going to be some 2-year-olds, especially from lease turn-ins, 2, 3 years old. What about when shouldn't you buy a vehicle? Some people say when a model is in high demand or limited production, that's not a good one to buy. Usually in very popular models, you might even do better with a leftover or late model because they have the highest resale percentage, so the difference in percentage at the end is less. In the not so popular models or not so good reputation, it's harder to find it. But usually the newer model works out better. So you're paying more for that leftover 2-year-old used even on the good models. But the point I'm trying to make is it's going to hold its value with what you invest anyway. And it's already got a good track record as far as repair. But if it's one of the better models like we talked about, you don't really have to worry about the fact that it had 15,000 miles on it. That's not that important. Some sources believe that when not to buy a new vehicle is at the beginning of the model year. Don't buy a new one just came out. I don't agree with that because the resale percentage based on time will be better for the fresh unit. So you may lay more out for it buying it beginning of the year, but you're going to get a lot more for it at the time. If you wait exactly 4 years and you bought it when it first came out, well, that's going to be different than someone that waited 6 months and bought it in exactly 4 years. They're going to be selling it 6 months later when the market will have changed some because it won't be as hot and new in the market. You just have to shop a little harder, get 5 or 6 quotes, especially if you're comparing leftover with a new one. There aren't a lot of times when you should not buy. I can't think of many reasons to not buy, except for right now when the market's screwed up. But in terms of weather or things like that, now is one of those should not buy times. I tell everybody, don't buy anything now. I wouldn't. Unless you have to. If you have to, you have to. But I wouldn't other than that. Usually there are mostly times when you should buy because there's an advantage. Read about the models available and the new stuff for that model year. Look at many reviews as you can, as many as you can. It's always good to look at the reviews on the vehicles you're looking to buy, and not for price. Never mind, I'm not talking about price. I'm talking about what's the history on it and what's good about that particular model. Look at the Consumer Report yearly editions for ratings. First read online, of course, but look at those books. Not so much the monthly editions because I've brought it up on the podcast. They make a lot of mistakes in the monthly one, but in the yearly ones are much more accurate. Maybe set up Google alerts for the models you're considering and check the calendar if you can time your purchase around the time when it might be best. If you've got time to buy, why not wait until there's the times at your advantage? It can make a difference of quite a chunk. What about time of the year for leasing? I get that question a lot. I like leasing. Leasing is almost always better with a new model year vehicle. I can't remember. I've never purchased a leftover on a lease. We talked about that briefly in the beginning, last few episodes ago, actually. When the official announcement day comes, go with the newer model for a lease, not the leftover. Now, if the new model's coming out in September and it's July or June, you got to go with the leftover. That's not a leftover yet. It's just the end of the model year. But other than announcement time, the timing advantages for leasing are the same as buying because to a dealer, it's like everything else. It's just another way of selling a vehicle. They don't care that you're leasing versus you're buying. They need that deal just as bad at the end of the month as any other, or in the wintertime, or all these different factors that we talked about. One other advantage to leasing is about the resale possibilities that are on hold right now. If resale doesn't work out for any of the reasons I've talked about, you can just turn it in and walk away. So it's not like you're going to lose. All you're going to lose is profit potential. And these guys are going to be sorry they did that because they colluded. A lot of the manufacturers did this change in the same month, and that's collusion. And they're going to end up paying people thousands of dollars to make up for what they took from them. That's a huge peace of mind knowing that you're not going to have to worry when you do lease about resale. Just don't have to worry about it. But those are all the main issues for time. Time of day. It makes a difference. It does. I mean, not every single sale, but in most cases it will. And whether it's, time of day and whether it's on the weekend or during the week or it's the end of the month or the weather, all those things that can make a difference. And you need to know about them. If you've got an advantage going in to make a deal, that's another thing you got to remember. You've got that little bit of edge. More edge than you have to begin with. Well, that's Deal Talk for this week. If you have a question or request or even a comment, please call, text, or email me. Callers or texters dial 407-801-4071. That's 407-801-4071. For email, it's dealtalk@mail.com. That's dealtalk@mail.com. Please don't forget to do a review and do yourself a favor by getting a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon or Nook. It's the best $3 you've ever spent, I'm telling you. Want to be a hero? Tell your friends and family about Deal Talk, and you'll be a hero because when they save money, they're going to thank you. If I can ever help you, if you have a question about the deal you're dealing on right now, you need a suggestion about a dealer or whatever, give me a call. Contact me and you'll hear from me, I promise. And remember, every payment you get should be CPI, complete payment information. Whenever they quote you a payment, you want to know the amount that they based the payment on, the number of months, the interest rate you used, and any required down payment to get to that amount they financed, anything that's going to be asked for. And get those terms every time they quote you a payment, not just the first time. These guys are slick. They can jump things around if you don't. Oh, we thought you knew that. Yeah, we thought you knew baloney. It saves any argument if you just get it with a payment every single time. And if you're not, you're going to do your own financing, every price you get's got to be all in. Every single cost required to buy the vehicle. The tax, the plates, the dealer fee, any aftermarket options, everything. You want to know a number with everything in it. They call it the OTD, out the door.